I kept thinking of the word gratitude when you were saying this, that what you're sharing, and this is something I work with parents on when they're negative or sad about their child's progress or lack thereof, especially when we first meet them. Believe it or not, the kids, well, I mean, I have to keep myself on task. You know me, I can go off on tangents upon tangents. But I think to myself that sometimes parents focus on all that their kids aren't doing rather than all that they are doing. And when they feel confident, and we see this over the evolution of intensive treatments or just treatment at center, but also at communicamp over the course of just day, you
Mhm.
see the change in the confidence, in the hope, in the belief, and that projects over to your child or your partner, whomever it might be. So it's really important for those listening to this that if you are working as a parent, if you have a child with selective mutism, if you're a teacher of a parent, sorry, if you're a teacher of a student with SM, you need to project hope and confidence and being pleased rather than, oh, why aren't you doing this? Oh, you need to do it. You should do that. As soon as you get into those conversations, that's when that projects over to the individual with SM and actually not only halts their progress, but
Mhm.
often causes regression and avoidance
Mhm.
because they feel like they're failing. And when you really talk to these individuals, parents specifically, they feel grief, they feel sad, they feel upset, and they're projecting that. So we have to really work hard with parents on, minimize the negative, focus on the positives, minimize the negatives, and all that your child is doing, not what they're not doing. And what are they good at? They're all good at something, right? And really focusing on those areas and be grateful for those. And we have to even get into things like great gratitude journals for not
Mhm.
only the adults that you're talking with, but also for the kids, the parents of the kids struggling. Do you want to
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that? Because we don't talk a lot about it, but it really made me think about that because that helps them not just be grateful, but add in there a section of what did my child do that was positive. Now, if your child or you as an adult struggling haven't been out and about, haven't been doing exposures, haven't been doing strategies and interventions, you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about COVID, right? There were families that just never left the house
Yeah.
because they couldn't. You didn't see the progress.
Yeah.
But for those that are out and about and doing exposures, and more
Yeah.
exposures, meeting them where they're at so there's success, not expecting them to do something they can't, you see the progress. We see it every day at our center.
Yeah.
Children, teens, and adults should not continue to be mute. There are strategies and inventions for everyone, no matter what your why is, to adapt to develop that treatment. So, again, with all that I just said,
Yeah.
touch on this because you, as a psychologist, deal with this so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because I think when we think about treatment in general, we're going to treatment typically because we're experiencing a challenge, right? And for our population, challenges to get our words out and succeed, right, from that element. But I think that, you know, we focus a lot on, okay, yes, they're doing this now, but we want to get there, or yeah, I guess they did that, but we want to move forward here. And so yes, we want to focus on that, and that is what your provider is meant to do, right? So when someone comes to me, I do want to hear your successes, but many times I want to hear your obstacles because I want to be the one to help tweak that to make it more successful. So we're not saying we don't want to focus on the things that are challenging, but I think
Right.
in doing that, it is important to reflect on, well, what are they doing? Because I think as you're mentioning, like, if we don't do that, many of our individuals that we work with, when we think about those whys of selective mutism, like 30 to 40% have, underlying speech and language challenges. So their expressive, abilities are tougher. So they might not be able to express their frustrations in some capacity. But we do have like over 80% of our kids that also have sensory sensitivity. So they're just sensitive and perceptive. So they're taking in so much of their environment, right? For those individuals that are overstimulated at times. And so why I'm saying that is our kids are actually very perceptive to our own emotions and our own feelings more than we think. And so if we show them that we're grateful and that we see their success, that modeling actually, believe it or not, falls onto our child more than we think. So the more that we're seeing and we're emphasizing and we're bringing that out in them, the more that they're likely going to start to see themselves in that way. Because for so many of our kids, they're that quote unquote child that doesn't talk, or that they're that child that is sitting alone in the corner in the classroom because their teacher doesn't know how to get them to engage with the other peers. And so they might be internalizing that and feeling that, and they might not know how to vocalize that, right? Or they might be feeling alone. But that's why there's so many times where we want you as parents to be those people to start bringing them bringing them out, highlight what they're good at, right? Bringing That's why we talk so much about high interest things. Is not just because, yes, we want to bring out other same age peers, right? And kind of similar minded people, but it's also to show your child, like, this is where you succeed. This is where you're your best self, and we want you to become that best self in all other aspects of your life. So we don't want to just focus on the fact that you don't quote unquote talk, right? But rather we want to focus on all the positive things that you do. And just in doing that, that confidence piece goes so far. So I think that there is
Which
so much.
lowers anxiety.
Exactly.
All of
It
this is
lowers
anxiety
anxiety,
lowering.
right? So the more confidence we feel, right, the more comfort we typically feel, the more connection we start to kind of get ourselves into because we're feeling good about ourselves, the more likely that our anxiety is going to lower and we're going to be progressing with our communication. So, I think it's important. I was just talking to a family about the importance of, being grateful. And we discussed the importance of having a gratitude journal where rather than just focusing on all the things that we want to work through in treatment, we also want to focus on the highlights and the wins that we kind of gather each day. So I have a client right now that has a younger child, and I'm recommending to the parents to just every single morning, write down like 3 wins that you feel, right? And kind of 3 things that you want to work through. And so just, the importance of being grateful. There's so many different types of gratitude journals that, we recommend throughout, but I definitely think that's really important because I think that it just, again, will highlight how much your child's doing. And as I said before, that then models, the type of behaviors that then you might see in your child. So definitely really important. And I think if we even have teenagers or young adults too, like even, emphasizing that they also have their own gratitude journals where they think about those wins and they think about, things that they really feel positive about and that they feel grateful for. So I don't know if you want to add anything, but I definitely
I
think.
think when you see things that are successful, you need to capitalize on that. So if, let's say, it's getting easier for you to do certain things. For example, when I don't know somebody, it's actually easier for me than when I'm with my aunts and uncles. So you want to not that you don't work with aunts and uncles, of course, we may need to bridge down with them, but see the things that are easier for you and build those up even more and and go on tangents off that. So
Mhm.
for example, maybe you're working on going into a store and you are now saying to family members, hey, I'll go pick up your prescription. I'll go pick up your dry cleaning. This is for older individuals, but parents too, like start to take the areas that are very successful and bridge to different things to do, and you will see the confidence rise, the anxiety will get lower, and so forth. So it's always moving. But I love the gratitude journal as we kind of, lump it together, gratitude, but it's the things that I'm grateful for today. Well, I am grateful that my child got up as a parent and didn't have a meltdown before school.
Mhm.
That's not something to be, yes, you might be frustrated, like, why did that happen? Why in other mornings was she or he melting down, but this morning she didn't. That's a good day. We started out good. And figuring out maybe what those look, listen, and learns, which will be a whole nother episode of look, listen, learn. What are our kids telling us without them telling us what they may be struggling with? So, with everything that your kids go through, everything you go through as an older individual, there's always reasons and there's always ways to adapt. And sometimes it's bridging down and not having the high expectation. So, one of the things I caution our listeners to is, are you meeting yourself where you are, meaning where you're at as an older individual? But for families, parents working with kids and teens, are your expectations where they should be? Or are they too far up or too far down where you're enabling? So that's important to work through with your treatment provider to know kind of where you're at. and then go back and kind of loop it into the whole grief thing, you start to see that you become way more accepting. When you have a game plan, when you have a treatment plan, when you know what you're working on, I have noticed over the course of my career that the grief goes down because they have somewhere to place it. And I know you're nodding. What do you want to say off that? Because I think this is important.
Yeah, no, I think that again, like sometimes when I think of the word grief, I think of the past, right? We think about the past, right? And that's even what, this person wrote in is just this idea around like I'm reflecting back and sad about maybe certain reflections they had as a child. And I think that the gratitude piece, right? Being grateful, thinking about those wins, right? Thinking about, the successes that maybe we did feel again, like I mentioned that example with my young adult client now that maybe had a lot of these successes as a child, but didn't see them currently as she's overcome her SM as those successes because now she maybe doesn't see those as wins, right? Comparatively to maybe what we're seeing for our younger kids that maybe are sharing their success stories as a 6-year old. But again, as we're kind of talking, everyone has their own journey, right? We all have our ability to overcome to our capacity. And I think that, when thinking about that word grief, I think that we, you know, could maybe try to shift that a little bit into how can we become more reflective and kind of reflect back on our past and think about, sure, I could have wanted this to happen or that to happen, but presently, what can I do to move forward and accept where I'm at right now and accept what I've gone through. And in doing that, you might notice a more positive outlook on life. So I think just all of those things kind of go together. And, our hope is that we provided you with some insight. I tried to give a great example of someone that I'm currently working through that has a very similar experience to what this question was. And, I think again, like having maybe even that treatment provider to work with you and kind of tackle that. I think that's a really big part of treatment and your journey as well is kind of reflecting back on that. And again, we're talking a lot about our selective mutism population, but I think a lot of young adults and later adulthood have very similar challenges when entering into therapy is to kind of work through and talk through certain things that they wanted to have happened or certain things that they hoped for in the past. But what I would try to challenge you on is how can we in the present moment look back, be grateful, think about some of those things, but then now how do we move forward to tomorrow and what does that look like?
And having that hope and belief, that's why it's so important for our listeners to be working with somebody that they have confidence in, that can help direct them, that they're seeing progress with, because once that hope is there and the belief, the grief starts to kind of, in this case, go down. Yes, you can't change the past. What's that saying? Depression's the past, anxiety's the future. So with the grief, sometimes you see the sadness in these individuals and we have to be careful with, especially if you're a parent, we're dealing with the projection to your child. But
Mhm.
I see that hope emerge. And when that hope emerges and that belief emerges, whatever age you are, it really does start to fuel more progress. And you start to let go and you start to become way more accepting. So I think that that is very important, and we can't minimize the feelings you have. We're not trying to erase them. We're
Yeah,
not trying to dismiss what you feel that you could have done. What if you did do this? What if you did do that? I wouldn't be here. I'd be doing this. Well, you don't know that, number one. And number two, wherever you are in your journey, you're starting. So maybe you're starting and you're older. That's okay.
right,
Or wait, maybe your child isn't so young.
right.
Maybe your child's older and you've been frustrated. You haven't seen the progress. And
Mhm.
now you may need to look for a new provider. It's really about finding the way and starting and knowing, okay, I'm moving forward,
Right,
not focusing on, because you can't change the past. You
exactly.
can only move forward.